Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to skip this one because that's just my intro slide. So this is our changes to the youth and family meetings. So Washington Youth and Family Meetings model is the result of a multi-year system improvement grounded in lived experience, staff feedback, national expertise, and external review. And so rather than maintaining those separate meeting models and meeting types of facilitation, one consistent structured process will be used in all meetings across the life of the case. Youth and family meetings is replacing all meetings under shared planning meetings, including family time, our family team decision-making meetings and shared planning meetings. And we can take questions at the end. I think that might be easier. And so I'll just kind of roll through these slides and then we'll do a Q&A. And so again, youth and family meetings is replacing the shared planning meetings, including the FTDM. The changes really are that we're implementing a statewide referral and that the meeting program consultants, our facilitators, will be inviting participants. And then a safety check-in for parents and youth will occur before each meeting. And that is just a very brief check-in to make sure that there is emotional and psychological safety in the meeting for the child, youth, or family parents that are attending. 2 to 3 questions and should happen in the preparation before meetings between caseworkers and youth and families, but it may be the facilitator that's doing it. We have some situations where those check-ins can occur, so our meeting facilitators will be helping out and either doing that with the caseworker or checking in with the youth or parents on their own. And then all the YFMs are facilitated by those trained meeting program consultants. Our facilitators, their title is meeting program consultant. And so you may hear me say that throughout, or MPC, and I'm referring to those facilitators. I'll try to keep saying that as I go. And they'll use a 6-stage process for all the meetings. So if you're familiar with our FTDM in 6 stages, we are applying those 6 stages through all meetings instead of having different facilitation models. And then our transparency and documentation. And so our MPCs will be charting the discussion either on those large white Post-its or whiteboards. And then that's going to result in an action plan that youth families and parties and plan participants leave meetings with. So a lot of our system improvements came from the DS settlement. And so a lot of our changes really were driven by the DS settlement. And so we were required to revise shared planning meetings and FTDMs, policy practices, and establish a quality assurance process. Ensure these practices are trauma-informed, culturally responsive, LGBTQIA plus affirming, and fulfill the following 5 functions on the next 2 slides. I did link, and I don't know if it came through in the PDF, but I can send these links too, but they're on our DCYF website, public facing. And so there's a settlement implementation plan. It's really long, but family group planning is our system improvement. It's 4.11 if anybody wants to look into that. And then the DS data addendum is what kind of our reporting and exit criteria is outlined in that report. And so 5 system improvements specific to meetings are to support and encourage the active participation of children and youth and their immediate and extended family members. All those who have trusting relationships with the child or families, they're really pointing to wanting to expand and include and strengthen and build upon family support networks. And that is really bringing everybody to the table for every single meeting and including our youth that are 12 years and older. Educating the family team about available services and placement options. We have some other system improvements listed below, which are placement options. And so talking about those in meetings, making sure that we are supporting the child or youth in the best plan for them and that parents also support. And so this is the bigger one of eliciting the value of the child or youth preferences, including but not limited to where to live, where to go to school, what treatment or services to receive, and what supports are necessary for safety and who is involved in their lives. So we have implemented this and trained this out and had a great engaging youth and meetings training for staff that we have been doing for about 6 months now, and that is really helping with strengthening this practice. And empowering and authorizing family teams to make and revisit decisions about how and where to best support the child or youth's health, safety, stability, cultural socialization, and relationships with their family. So that kind of points to our relational permanency and really making sure that we are keeping children and youth connected to the people that are most important to them, to their community, to their culture, and talking about that in each and every meeting. And then providing the necessary supports and resources identified in our current policies and procedures. Oh, might have went a little bit ahead there. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so our model is adapted from evident changes team decision-making model using the 6 stages to guide teams through collaborative decision-making and planning. And so Evident Change is formerly the Children's Research Center and National Council on Crime and Delinquency. It's a nonprofit that uses data and research to improve our social systems. Evident Change began carrying on the research and implementation for the TDM model in 2020. And this is also, the TDM model is also part of the Family to Family initiative that was developed by Annie Casey. So the process of each meeting, the same 6 stages are used for all meetings. And the purpose is going to determine how those stages are facilitated. And so our decision-making meetings require a formal consensus-based process for recommendations for safety and placement. And when not making placement decisions, our discussions are driven by the purpose of the meeting, still making other decisions about family time, services, and other permanent plans as we move forward. And all meetings will include discussions on cultural, relative, and kin connections for engagement and relational permanency. And then our consensus really is trying to get everybody to live with the plan. If there is not consensus reached, then it is the department's responsibility to make that decision and to make that recommendation. And so the purpose is really to come together to have these transparent discussions and help us all reach that. But if we can't, then it is the department's responsibility. And here's our nice visual about the stages of the meeting. And so I'll kind of walk through. We have, if you see, there's a before and after, and that's really pointing to preparing families for meetings. So we're training caseworkers and supervisors on preparing families for meetings. This is something that was not trained out before. Annie Casey didn't have a training for caseworkers, and this is something we got from our contractor Evident Change and got some implementation support on. And so that a lot of the preparation and helping families and youth and children understand the meeting process beforehand and what to expect. And so the introduction includes the group team or shared agreements and respectful communication. In that stage, also, we're going to be asking if there's any other questions, making sure that everybody knows, the purpose of the meeting and how it's going to occur. And then our second stage is identifying the situation. And so that is what brought us to the meeting today. What are we here to discuss today? 2 to 3 sentences, really brief. The caseworker is gonna talk about that and what brought us to the table and what we're going to be looking at for the stages of the meeting. Assessing the situation is where we really talk about the safety threats, the concerns, the risks, and then the strengths of the family as well to build upon. And so everybody gets to dig more deeply into safety threats and potential protective capacities. This is where we share a brief family history and clarify any current custody and placement status for those initial meetings. Stage 4 is developing ideas. And this stage is really about brainstorming and coming up with as many ideas as we possibly can, really looking at quantity and not quality, and not reality testing during this stage. So we're really just developing ideas. And the next stage, stage 5, where we reach a decision and come up with the action plan together, is where we would reality test those ideas and really help youth and parents and children, if they're present too, understand why some of their ideas or some things can't move forward at that time, but really be able to talk about them and have transparent conversations. And then our stage 6 is the recap and close. So just making sure that everybody knows who's responsible for what, and what those next steps are, including who is responsible for what by when. And the action plan will leave the meeting with plan participants. And so they will know exactly what's supposed to happen next when the meeting is over. I touched on this before, but before the meeting, the caseworker will collaborate with children, youth, and families and encourage them to identify kin and other supports to include for invites to the meeting. They'll discuss the preferred date, time, and location, and if that will be held in person or remote. And then any language access translation services and ADA accommodations needed. And so who all participates in meetings? Same list as we've always had, really wanting to encourage youth 12 and older and to bring two supports of their choice. And so this is something that our caseworkers will be talking to youth about and identifying two of their supports. And if it's not a professional, so it can be supports of their choice that is not their caseworker or their representing attorney. So you are all are part of the meeting, but they get to bring two additional supports of their choice. Parents, placement caregivers, family members, and kin. The facilitator, caseworker, supervisors, and if any other DCYF staff are needed to support the meeting. Tribal representatives, community partners, GAL and CASA, court partners, attorneys, and LPD social workers. Going back to this has been kind of a bigger contentious point that we just really want to reiterate that the preference of youth and family is central to the decision of whether having the meeting in person or remote. So in-person meetings encouraged whenever possible, really supporting that strong engagement and trust sharing among the team. But if there are reasons, virtual and hybrid meetings for accessibility, safety, and logistical needs will always be an option. So parent safety check-in. This is really pointing to just wanting to check in. Safety is critical for parents and children in meetings. And so some questions that the caseworker or facilitator may ask parents is, are you concerned about the safety or the safety of anyone else in the room today? Making sure that any court orders are in place. If there are any court orders that we need to have separate meetings. And if there's anything else that they feel they need to have a safe meeting. And so they're meant to be very brief and just check in before the process starts. We really want to create a place of psychological and emotional safety and 2 to 3 minutes. So not a 15-minute thing. And so same for youth, their safety check-in is pretty small too here. So really just asking again about their safety, offering alternate options for them to communicate during the meeting, texting, if they're in person on a notepad, maybe creating a nonverbal signal if they need to take a break. Some of the questions we may ask youth is, we ask them to be alone and make sure that they're alone during the safety check-in and answer yes or no questions. Do you feel like your physical or emotional safety will be in danger as a result of this meeting? And to maintain everyone's safety, do you feel it's necessary to conduct today's meeting separately for you? And if not, would you like to use a code word? And so coming up with a code word or a signal for their safety, and then consider if there isn't anything, it's okay to let them know that if there's something that happens in the meeting, that they're okay to speak up, and we really want to encourage and elevate their voice in the meeting. In virtual settings, this can be done in a breakout room before the meeting happens, before everybody else is let in. So if there's a 5-minute pause before the meeting starts, it might be because youth is getting a safety check-in. So our meeting program consultants will be entering all participants identified by the caseworker on the referral and invited, including all professionals working with the family. So you maybe already get invites from meeting consultants, but this will be a change. If you aren't already, you'll be getting meeting invites from consultants. This is an example of charting the whiteboard. And so really just having this present to start that conversation about what are we worried about, what are those needs, safety concerns, and barriers, what's working well, and then what needs to happen next. And so this is a facilitation tool for our consultants to help build that action plan. And something new that we are introducing to meetings is the circle of support or the informal family mapping. And so this is that core component of strength-based and family-centered practice. and developing and strengthening the safety support network for the family, made up of extended family, friends, community members who will work with professionals to develop and maintain a plan that will ensure the children's long-term safety, belonging, and well-being. So this will be developed during initial meetings and revisited during meetings after. So since we're just implementing this, you may see it come about in your placement stability or permanency meetings, and just really looking at identifying and putting it into a place. We probably have these supports written down somewhere else, but it's getting them into a document that we can revisit during each meeting to build upon. And the purpose really is to see who we can bring maybe from outer circles to inner circles to support the family long after we're involved and long after the meeting. This is copyrighted by Sonia Parker, and so there is a booklet and more information on this that she has available for free online. So our meeting types crosswalked, I mentioned earlier, we had several different meeting names or meeting types, facilitation styles. And so this is our crosswalk that is getting us kind of into a 3 meeting type. So 3 buckets is what we've been calling them. And so these shared planning meetings, these were all the names of the meetings on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side that tells us what kind of meeting this is going to be now. This is probably much more important for caseworkers, but if you get invited to an initial meeting, well, that probably won't happen as much because children aren't represented. But our placement stability meeting, you may say here that is different from the placement change. And so it's the same meeting, we're just changing that title to be placement stability because it really is about trying to stabilize placement and prevent a disruption from occurring. And so then all of our shared planning meetings, permanency planning meetings would fall into the permanency bucket that you'll see here. And then all the meetings will follow that 6-stage process and may take up to 1.5 hours to 2 hours for some of these meetings. And our 3 meeting types, and then we'll be almost done. So an initial meeting is to determine if removal can be prevented through engagement and prevention services. It seeks to make that live decision and is intended to occur prior to recommending a removal, including voluntary placement agreements, and before the initial shelter care hearing or as soon as possible following a protective custody. And the focus of the initial meeting is to ensure child safety and well-being while making every effort to keep their family intact. The group will carefully reviews the threats to child safety as reflected in the safety assessment and seeks to identify relevant protective factors to build safety plans that will enable children to remain or immediately return home with appropriate services and support. When not possible, the team will create an out-of-home care plan that reflects the least restrictive option possible that will keep the children safe and preserve and nurture the child's family and community connections. And a placement stability prior placement change meeting is to ensure safety and stability for children and youth in out-of-home care, intended to occur at the first sign of placement instability. So we really don't want to wait until we get the notice that that the caregiver is no longer able to have the child in their care, but really when we have those first signs to come together to see how we can support the child and youth and caregiver to stabilize the placement. Used to develop the specific, individualized, and appropriate responses. And when we're not able to stabilize placement, develop a transition plan when a move is necessary. Also, we may have placement stability meetings for a step down or level of care for our BRS or QRTP placements, and they fall into this category. So anytime a placement would change if would be a placement stability meeting. Then our permanency meetings are to discuss safe, stable, and timely permanency. Prior, under that shared planning meeting umbrella, our permanency planning staffings or permanency planning meetings. An opportunity to build and maintain children and youth cultural and community connections to include relatives, kin, tribes, and others that are important. So that circle of support will be an important process important piece of this meeting as well to see who else we can bring into the plan to help us reach permanency. And then a meeting to discuss permanent plans and any recommendations to make changes to the permanent plan. And so that would be if we're looking at changing to guardianship, adoption, or another planned living arrangement. Also, our EFC and 17.5 are transitioning youth to adulthood staffing meetings that happen will still continue to fall under the permanency. And as we've talked about probably several times here, this is that change where the action plan, youth parents, parties, and action plan participants will receive the plan at the end of the meeting in written or electronic form. This plan is charted and made together, and then we'll be putting it either on a piece of paper or taking a picture. However, the consultant is going to get that to everybody so that there isn't a wait or a need to wait longer to know what's going to happen next. This action plan really supports that. And then if attorneys or parties are not present, we're going to try to add a action plan item so that everybody gets the notes at the same time, the action plan at the same time. And that meeting summary, which is kind of referred to a lot as our meeting notes. This is the summary, and casework or consultants have 7 days to put this into our system. These notes aren't readily available after the meeting. They'll go through a normal process of however caseworkers or discovery units get these meeting notes out to parties. But this is really just a summary of the conversation and the discussion, and including the placement decision and how we got there. So it's not going to be verbatim notes. In some areas, we really drifted from practice where these notes became almost a transcription of the meeting. We're moving back towards just a summary because it's a summary of the process and how we got to that. It's a discussion, right? Not a transcribed process. And then the resources are linked here too, and we have a nice youth guide for decision making and transition planning that I am updating to have youth and family meetings language. So that should be available in publication soon. But it's just a touch point and a reference to have conversations with children and youth to prepare them for meetings. And our regional meeting program administrators are our meeting program consultant supervisors. So we have 2 in Region 1 and 1 in Regions 2 through 6. And a training and development team that is heading up training staff in person. So we got 2 in-person trainings going, and I'll be coaching consultants and staff in the meetings model. Myself as a program manager, and our child welfare QA CQI research administrator, Matt Burrows and Alyssa, are all on this project team.
Hi, Sarah. I'm sorry if I missed this. I think you called them MPCs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that the same thing as a facilitator, just a different name? Okay.
Yeah. Their title, so their job title is meeting program consultant, but they are the facilitators. So I tried to kind of do both, but I maybe need to point that out in my trainings that really early on that they are the facilitators, but they are also, so really supporting a lot more pieces of this too than just facilitating the meeting.
Thank you. Can you talk a bit about how ideally scheduling should happen? I think the reality of just about every FTDM, SPM, YFM I've been to is that here's the time, with little input from, like, sometimes professional parties try to, get it scheduled a particular time, but I like seldom see caregivers or families input being elicited for time. So how is it supposed to work? And if it's not working that way, how can we help it get more in accord with how it should work?
So that is a change. We are asking parents and youth to identify the time and day that works best for them. Obviously, that's not always going to be when we have emergent situations. It may be what the available meeting is the next day. But as we move to the placement, stability, and permanency meetings, the schedules of professionals, including DCYF staff, really you should take that back burner where the parent and youth and their schedule and when they're available is to the forefront. And so if they're giving us, 3 or 4 times, we're going to try to make one of those times work to schedule it. So professionals will receive the invite and be notified of when the meeting is happening.
Are the permanency play so I guess when you talked about the different buckets, the different
Mhm.
categories, I guess it's a two-part question. One is that the difference of the different categories of the YFM indicated in the invite. And then two, I know permanency planning staffings were, I think, occurring every like 4 months. Is that schedule still going to happen, or what does that look like for those staffings?
Okay, so the first part of your question, remind me again.
So the categories, the
Uh-huh.
three buckets, is that indicated like in the invite of the meeting, or what does that look like for parties to know which YFM they're attending?
Yes, that will be an invite. And so your invites typically will be coming in email, but if there's a phone call, they would indicate that we would be coming together for either a placement stability or permanency meeting in this case, to discuss and maybe even give a little bit more information about that in the invite, pending the purpose of the meeting. So that could occur if we have a youth that is 17.5 and we're having a staffing. So that would be probably be included. And we're having a permanency meeting to discuss um, transition planning for this youth. And the second part was
The timeline for, so is there still a timeline
yes,
for permanency planning staffings
yes.
as there was before?
So that is hopefully to occur. We're asking and teaching caseworkers to put those referrals in to occur prior to a dependency review or a permanency review hearing. And so the cadence may be that same. If you've been having meetings every 4 months, the intent is to have them before the court hearing to give the child or youth opportunity to contribute to their case plan court report.
Thank you.
I'm happy to hear that you were having permanency meetings every 4 months. That is good. That just makes me happy, and that it will. I see that probably being the cadence with the timeline if we think about it.
And another question. Um, the typical structure of past meetings I've been in is that they're almost bifurcated, where the first part, maybe the caregiver is present and other entities or parties, providers who are not subject to party confidentiality. And, we talk about updates about the child, maybe more general things. And then about half the group leaves. And then we delve into the meatier bit, the confidential bit, usually talking about parent services or like what's going on that we're trying to address. How does that fit in with this 6-step framework, or are we going to see a departure from that?
We're hopefully going to see that shift to where everybody is present at the meeting. The I think the shift is this is supposed to be solution focused and strength based, where some of our permanency meetings may have drifted to be a case update or a case review of deficiencies. We're not focusing on parent services during these meetings. It'll be more focused on child and youth and what they need and how the services that are available for the whole family as a unit and what that looks like and how that gets us closer to permanency. There may be ideas during the idea stage developed about services that could be taken with the caseworker and the legal part, the parent's attorney or parent attorneys, however that looks, to develop their case plan after the meeting. But the action plan is just those specific actions that are going to help us get closer to some of those case plan goals, but it's not to develop the case plan. And so we wouldn't be indicating services for parents on in the action plan. That would be something between the caseworker and parent and parties afterwards. So I think that shift is going to take some time. I know that there's some very strong feelings, but we are asking everybody to agree to confidentiality at the start of every meeting still, and what that looks like. And so helping and being curious about the reasons why we don't want others in the meeting. If there's we definitely want to honor parent and youth preferences, but also encouraging and being curious and helping them understand the importance of all of the people that love and care about the child and youth being present to make the best plan for them. And we can avoid certain conversations during the meeting if we need to, if parents don't want us to talk about those things. Because again, the focus really should be on the children and youth and not on parent services during the entire meeting. Did that help answer the question? Because that the part where half of the people leave does not fit into the model very well. And so trying to weave these in.
It does in theory. I'm just thinking like practically,
Yeah.
and sorry for taking over this whole conversation, but like we're having a meeting because we've learned a parent has relapsed, right? They're in active use and we're trying to figure out if it's safe. Can the kids stay there? So in past meetings, maybe we do child updates, fluffy, and then everyone leaves and we're going to actually talk about this parent's use and if we can safety plan around it. I'm anticipating like that conversation not happening in under this new model just because parents attorneys are not going to want that discussed in front of other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And the purpose really isn't to, we should be coming to meetings to talk about engagement. What are those barriers to, it, maybe not calling a meeting just because a parent relapsed. I think that may be a different way. Our purpose for the meeting might look different. So we're talking about what are those needs and those barriers that get us to the action plan, and then a safety plan or case plan would be developed afterwards with the legal party and the parents. And so really not focusing on it. They may come up during ideas, but not so much going into this happened, this didn't happen. Sometimes there can be arguments that occur during meetings. We really want to avoid that and be focused and sticking to the stages. And if we get through every stage, everyone should get to have their voice heard during each stage, and really having facilitators kind of go around the room and elicit information from quiet people, just asking if they want to participate. Sometimes gets more information out so that we can come up with the best plan. But really, it's going to be a work in progress. I think some areas more than others may start their meetings and just do that and dismiss everybody, where there may be other practice where everybody stays in the meeting. So we're really hoping to get meetings that are collaborative and to begin at the beginning and then strengthen the support network as we move forward.
Can I add one piece to that?
Yeah.
Sarah, you did a lovely job describing how, how we're giving grace as we learn the model and as we transform. But another piece to your example specifically is that both the parent and their attorney would know that we are coming together because we need to address safety planning around this relapse. And so that gives an opportunity for them ahead of time to then identify who should I make sure is included that can help support me with safety planning. And those people should be at that meeting. And if they're going to be identified as potential safety plan participants, or if they're there to provide any support to support the situation involving the relapse, they should be a part of the conversation. And the conversation should not be about forgive me for sounding dramatic, but a moral failing that somebody had because they relapsed. The conversation should be about how are we going to implement supports to preserve this situation so that this relapse doesn't result in, that we can't preserve the situation. So I just wanted to add that piece too. With those examples, that should be known ahead of time so that people can think about who they want at the table.
So that brings up another interesting point, and I'm wondering how you guys fit this into the model. There are situations where kids shouldn't be listening to what their parents have done. So how does the model incorporate, especially for younger children? I was just listening to something, like where a divorce attorney or a divorce judge was like, no, your kid does not need to hear this back and forth between the parents, right? How are we incorporating that where a kid maybe shouldn't be hearing what's going on with their parents? For example, that their parents relapsed or that their parents are struggling in some way. What do we do? Are we going to invite the kid to that situation so that they can be part of the case plan? Because that seems hard on children.
I think we're avoiding that back and forth. And so we're training our meeting program consultants, our facilitators to really manage that discussion. But there will be times where if there are younger children there that we have to take them out of the room or ask the youth to step out if there is a conversation. But on the other side of that, I think that a lot of evidence has shown that youth know, they already know what's going on, and so leaving them out of the conversation encourages them to make up stories about what happened, and a lot of self-blame can come in through that, and so there's a balance there on what is appropriate, and also that it comes into preparing too, and so hopefully, and we want to encourage this, that the caseworker is very aware of the situation of the child or youth, and if they are able to attend, and if they already have knowledge, but it shouldn't be an argument back and forth. And I think there's an argument to have youth at the table to be able to express their voice, and if they need to step out, they need to step out. But really making sure that we're giving them that chance, and talking to parents before too, that your child is going to be here in the meeting, and if there are discussions that need to happen, maybe those happen after the meeting versus in the meeting.
So, as the check-in at the beginning of the meeting, is that maybe something that could be told to the youth? There's going to be some discussion here about some of the things that your parents have done or involved in, and it might be very difficult to hear. If at any time you feel uncomfortable, or maybe you don't want to be a part of this, you're welcome to let me know or raise your hand, or maybe give them that type of information, or maybe even let them know what the discussion might entail. Your parents were involved with, misuse of substances, or, just so, and like you say, the children likely know, but knowing and hearing it, I think, are two completely different things. Sometimes making things up might help them protect themselves too. So, and I'm hoping that social workers maybe know these kiddos well enough to make a good judgment call as to what children are ready to learn what, when, and how. Because not all children at the age of 12 or 13 or 15 are ready to hear maybe the sordid details of what's going on in their parents' lives. So, and I'm sure that that these cases are very difficult at times. So hopefully, and as a GAL, we don't deal with children that age. So, our children aren't involved in these meetings. But just hearing that, I'm thinking, whew, that would be a difficult determination. So, just looking at the model, the check-in beforehand might be a really good time to maybe make some of those determinations if the child's ready and willing maybe to hear, or maybe they want to have a private discussion about it before or after, and maybe not hear about it in front of a bunch of people that they're not familiar with or don't know. Maybe that's going to be a little overwhelming for them. So just maybe some ideas about how to implement those things, because those can be very difficult decisions, obviously, to have and to hear about people you love and that, are a part of your life. So just kind of some thoughts.
Yeah, and the youth conversation, the guide to meetings that we're updating for youth and family meetings, I think those are good ideas too, to re-emphasize that, using that to talk through what could be talked about during the meeting. So we really are that caseworker training that was missing the first time we rolled this out in 2012. That the emphasis really is on preparing youth and children for the meeting if they're attending. And so what's that look like? And if they're not attending, how are we bringing their voice into the meeting? So we got 2 or 3 engagement tools from Evident Change to help with that as well, to give caseworkers tools to elicit some of that information and to have those conversations without directly just coming out and saying, are you safe in this meeting? Right? So yeah, that great feedback.
This is Erin of Benton County. I just want to clarify the action plan and the meeting summary. It can be sent to us through an email.
Yeah, the action plan meeting participants will leave with, and the summary is what the facilitators have 7 days to enter into the case record. And so however you get notes from your caseworker. I think in some areas, the MPCs, the facilitators were sending those out right after the meeting. But we're not, the shift is that they're not going to be sending those. They're putting those into the FamLink, into our case record, and then however caseworkers get that information out. So if that's a request from you to get an email, then that would be the normal process.
And up until recently, we were given chat screening reports, the facilitator summary, and recently we were told, nope, you guys can't have access to any of those anymore. And I said, but we have a court order saying we have access to all of this stuff as a guardian ad litem, and we're being told by the department, nope, we can't do that anymore. So I'm just wondering what the shift was, or if it's just some of the supervisors in our area that are saying that.
Alyssa, do you have any information on that piece?
Yeah, I think probably the shift was or is that we're making an effort around statewide consistency for our process of sharing records. And so it could be that the area where you're in was doing some alignment around that. That's part of the reason why our meeting summaries are being grouped into that. They're part of the case file. And so however our partners request or receive information about the case file, the meeting summary will be a part of that process instead of having a separate process. But my best guess is that, yeah, there was probably in your area some alignment happening with their statewide process for sharing information with partners.
Hi, this is Ruth Ellen in the same county as Aaron. What I've been told on some of that is that we have to get it in discovery. Well, the problem is sometimes we don't get discovery for 4 to 6 months. So when we're trying to find a no contact order, we're trying to get visit reports. We can't wait 4 to 6 months when we have a report that's due in 3 weeks. And we have a court order that we have access to this information. So we can't adequately advocate for a child and try to make a report to the court that is, you know, a full report when we don't have the information that we need in order to, you know, make this report. So are we supposed to be asking for discovery on a weekly basis? How is that supposed to look on our side?
I think the best thing that I could recommend, because neither Sarah or I work in our discovery sections, but I would encourage you to contact the area administrators in the offices or regional leadership to see to make sure that there's a clear understanding of all the discovery processes, and then to troubleshoot some of those time constraint barriers, because all of those discovery requests are processed a specific way. And so I think our leaders in our offices or in our regions would like to know if there are barriers around the time constraints, and especially for you all to be able to do your piece of the job and get information to the court timely. We also have to do that. So I think that we can respect that there's a need for that. So that's what I would recommend, is go to your local leadership contact and see if those changes, if there's a process that can be better, more supportive.
And guys, we can talk more about that at the program managers meeting. I'm thinking maybe there's a group of us that need to get together. And I'm also thinking parents' attorneys might want to jump in on this conversation as well as kids' attorneys. So look out, Alyssa.
And actually there's another conversation we've been having that has to do with discovery, is that we've been getting a lot of discovery that is heavily redacted. And so we brought that up with our discovery unit as well, about the understanding, because once again, our court order says that we have access to all the information. So we're questioning about why all the redaction. So that's been another discussion here that we've had ongoing as well. And we understand
And we can talk about that at the program managers meeting. I think we're getting a little off topic here. So any other questions about the YFM process?
This harkens back to a question I asked earlier, because I'm just thinking our judges frequently, you know, there's an emergency motion to modify visitation or change placement or remove, and the judge says, I'm gonna order parties to meet and safety plan. I'm ordering parties to meet and try to figure it out. And what she's asking is for creation of a concrete safety plan or creation of the documents that previously we would have made in a shared planning meeting, FTDM, I guess FTDM, which I'm hearing you say now is this is no longer the forum for creation of those types of written plans. So if those don't happen during these kinds of meetings, when what is it called when we meet to create one of those? Is it just something that we do it without a facilitator, we do it without a MPC? Or is it like part B of the meeting? How is that supposed to work?
So I think that if there's agreement to follow the 6-stage process to have that meeting, there may have been some misunderstandings of our meeting, like what a facilitated meeting is, and so these will last at least an hour. So I think that if there's a request just to have a discussion for legal parties to get together and figure it out, I don't know that that's a YFM, because the YFM is to include youth and parents and really elicit their voice, to have a transparent discussion about a recommendation that we're going to make to the court. If we've already made the recommendation, there's big disagreement. I think that that's more of a staffing, and Alyssa, correct me if I'm wrong, versus, a YFM, unless we're really wanting to go through the process and a purpose. And so if we're making a decision about family time, that may be different than a service.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that the YFM is really anchored in what type of decision needs to be made. So absolutely, a judge ordering all parties to come together and plan for safety could be related to a larger decision that needs to be made. And so then in that case, the discussion would be around creative ideas to generate that safety plan. I think the distinction is just that the safety plan itself, the document that, we write out and everybody gets their copy, that would happen following the meeting. The meeting itself would be discussion and ideas around to plan for whatever decision needs to be made. And so either a safety plan or a case plan could be a result, and those would be indicated on the action plan, the next steps, right? Caseworker will meet immediately following with the family and write out the safety plan, right? So it's a little bit around semantics, and then a little bit around it will be a YFM if there's a decision that needs to be made. And I'll also add, we've heard from some judges that didn't realize we had a specific meeting model, and that they've commented that they've ordered for parties to meet and didn't realize they were ordering for this structured facilitated meeting. They just wanted people to come together and plan. And if that's the case, then that wouldn't need to be a facilitated meeting.
Melissa, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. And hopefully I don't cut off. I keep getting an alert that my internet's unstable. I have a question. We actually had a CASA bring this up, and I was like, that's an interesting question or way of looking at things. So when we join a meeting that's now called YFM, we agree to confidentiality. So question kind of came up like, well, can I include any of this information that I learned during the YFM in a court report, because I had agreed to confidentiality? So that's basically breaking confidentiality. So what is the view of that and policies?
So in our confidentiality, it does say that the information will be used for case planning. And so I think that, Alyssa, correct me if I'm wrong, if that covers that that information is used to do, to move us forward. Case planning can mean lots of things, but I think in the context of that question, that it's covered under that, because even, our summary of notes may not include every little tiny detail, where a case note would have that more detailed information. So there may be times where you are taking notes in meetings that help your report.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, Alyssa and Sarah, thank you so much for this. I'm sure we'll probably be back in touch, but we'll
Yeah.
also have the meeting on the 30th as well. And yeah, thank you for doing this. Thank you for reaching out, and thank you for the invitation. We really appreciate you taking the time to kind of explain this new process and for us to understand it all better. Appreciate the time. And
Yeah,
anyone that
thank
wants,
you so much.
thank you. Anyone that wants to stick around and have a debrief without Alyssa and Sarah, let's do that right now.
All right,
Thanks,
bye. Thank
guys.
you so much.